in a time when lawmen were killers.
Now look, I've done lists based on Scorsese, Tarantino, Spielberg, but today we're doing something different. Today we're taking our cues from a man who doesn't need a director's chair to command respect. Chuck Norris has been watching westerns his whole life, studying them, talking about them in interviews for decades. He knows what a real western looks and feels like. And honestly, when Chuck Norris tells you to watch a movie, you watch the movie. These are the 11 best westerns according to Chuck Norris. Hi, my name is Jeffrey, and this is Old School Movies. The Outlaw Josey Wales, 1976.
Kingdom come. A man like Wales.
The Outlaw Josey Wales came out in 1976, and Chuck Norris has been vocal about this one for years. He's called it one of the greatest westerns ever made, full stop. And look, it's hard to argue with him on this one. Clint Eastwood directs himself here as Josey Wales, a Missouri farmer whose family gets slaughtered by Union soldiers during the Civil War. He joins a Confederate guerrilla outfit. The war ends, his men surrender, and then the Union soldiers massacre them anyway. Josey doesn't surrender, he runs. And then he spends the rest of the movie being hunted while somehow accidentally collecting a ragtag group of misfits along the way. An old Cherokee chief, a couple of elderly settlers, a young Navajo woman. They all just kind of attach themselves to this man who wants nothing to do with anybody. What makes this one work is that it's not really about revenge, even though revenge is all over it. It's about a broken man who has to figure out whether there's any reason left to keep going. Eastwood plays it quiet and deadly, and it works perfectly. Norris talked about how the film never flinches. The violence is real, the consequences are real, and nobody gets redeemed cheaply. You earn your way out of the darkness in this movie, or you don't get out at all. One of the all-time greats. Norris is right on this one. True Grit, 1969. True Grit, the 1969 version, John Wayne version. And before anyone in the comments comes for me, yes, I know the Coen brothers version is excellent. We can have that conversation another day. Chuck Norris grew up on John Wayne, and this is the film he's pointed to when talking about Wayne at his absolute peak. Wayne plays Rooster Cogburn, a fat, one-eyed, whiskey-soaked U.S. Marshal who gets hired by a 14-year-old girl named Maddie Ross to track down the man who killed her father. And the thing people forget about this movie is how funny it is. Maddie is completely fearless, and she basically runs circles around every adult in the film. She out-negotiates horse traders. She out-argues lawyers. She is 14 years old, and she is the most competent person in the entire movie. Wayne won his only Oscar for this role, and Norris has said that performance showed him something important about how a tough guy could also be vulnerable and funny without losing any of his edge. Rooster Cogburn is a mess. He's unreliable, and he drinks too much, and he is absolutely the man you want next to you when things go wrong. Director Henry Hathaway shot this thing in Colorado, and it looks gorgeous. Big skies, real weather, locations that feel lived in. This isn't a backlot western. This is the real thing. High Noon, 1952.
Terror-stricken town left him to face 4 killers.
High Noon, 1952. Gary Cooper. And here's where Chuck Norris gets really interesting, because this isn't the obvious pick for a guy who built his career on roundhouse kicks and machine guns. But Norris has talked about this film in multiple interviews, and he consistently calls it one of the most important westerns ever made. The setup is almost insultingly simple. Marshal Will Kane is retiring, he's getting married, he's done. And then word comes in that a killer he put away is getting out of prison and coming back to town on the noon train with 3 of his men. And every single person in town, including Kane's new wife, tells him to just leave. Just go. It's not worth it. He doesn't leave. What Norris connected to here is the idea of a man doing what's right when absolutely nobody is backing him up. No cavalry coming, no last-minute allies. Just one man standing in the street because running away isn't something he knows how to do. Norris said this film influenced how he thought about his own action movie characters. The lone guy who doesn't quit. Director Fred Zinnemann shot the whole thing in roughly real time, and that ticking clock feeling never lets up. 84 minutes of pure pressure. Grace Kelly is in it too, which doesn't hurt. Honestly, one of the most perfectly constructed westerns ever put on film. Tombstone, 1993.
I didn't think you had it in.
Tombstone, 1993. Now we're talking. Chuck Norris absolutely loves this movie, and honestly, who doesn't? If you tell me you don't like Tombstone, I'm gonna need you to check your pulse because something might be wrong. Kurt Russell plays Wyatt Earp, retired lawman who just wants to settle down and run a saloon in Tombstone, Arizona. He's got his brothers with him, he's got his ailing friend Doc Holliday played by Val Kilmer, and he's got absolutely zero interest in being a hero anymore. And then, the Cowboys, the real-life and outlaw gang that terrorized the Arizona territory, push things too far. And Wyatt Earp decides he's done being polite about it. Val Kilmer, as Doc Holliday, is one of the great performances in Western history. I'm not being dramatic about that. The man is dying of tuberculosis, and he still shows up to the gunfight at the OK Corral. He's funny and tragic and terrifying, all at the same time. Norris said in an interview that Kilmer's performance reminded him of why the Western genre could still produce genuine movie magic even in the 90s when everyone had basically given up on it. The gunfight itself runs about 30 seconds, which is historically about right. Director George Cosmatos doesn't drag it out. It's fast and ugly, and then it's over. Just like the real thing apparently was. The Magnificent Seven, 1960. The Magnificent Seven, 1960. This one is a remake of Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, and Norris has talked about how this film showed him that a Western didn't have to be American in its soul to feel completely authentic. Yul Brynner leads a group of 7 gunfighters hired to protect a small Mexican village from a bandit army led by Eli Wallach. And the cast they assembled for this thing is just absurd. Steve McQueen, James Coburn, Charles Bronson, Robert Vaughn. Every single one of them went on to be a massive star. You're watching this movie going, wait, that's him too? What Norris has always appreciated about this one is the code these men operate by. They're not doing it for the money, not really. The pay is terrible, and the odds are worse. They're doing it because there's something in them that can't walk away from people who genuinely need help. That's a Western value in its purest form. Elmer Bernstein's score is one of the most recognizable in film history. You've heard it 1,000 times in commercials and trailers, and you probably didn't even know where it came from. It came from here. The film wasn't actually a massive hit when it first came out, but over decades it just became one of those movies everyone agrees on. A genuine classic. Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968.
Land grabber, the outlaw.
Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. Sergio Leone. And look, we already talked about how Scorsese considers this one of the best widescreen films ever made. Chuck Norris agrees completely. He's pointed to Leone's direction specifically as a masterclass in how to use a camera to tell a story without saying a single word. Henry Fonda plays the villain here, which at the time was genuinely shocking. Fonda was America's good guy. That was his whole brand. And Leone cast him as one of the most coldest, most ruthless killers in Western history. The opening scene alone, where 3 men wait at a train station for what feels like forever, is one of the most purely cinematic things you'll ever see. Charles Bronson plays the mysterious harmonica-carrying stranger. Claudia Cardinale plays a widow who arrives at her new homestead to find her family massacred. Jason Robards plays a charming outlaw. And all of these storylines build toward each other slowly, deliberately, almost infuriatingly slowly, if you're not in the right mood for it. Norris said this film taught him that patience is a weapon, in action movies, in westerns, in life. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just wait. The film runs nearly 3 hours, and every single minute of it matters. Don't watch this one if you've got somewhere to be. Lonesome Dove, 1989.
Bad as I ever seen.
Lonesome Dove, 1989. Technically, this is a television miniseries, not a theatrical film. And I know some people are going to argue with me about including it. But it's 4 hours long, it won 8 Emmy Awards, and Chuck Norris has flat out called it the greatest Western story ever told. So it's on the list. Deal with it. Larry McMurtry's novel is basically the Western to end all Westerns, and this adaptation does it full justice. Robert Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones play Gus McCrae and Woodrow Call, 2 aging former Texas Rangers who decide to drive a cattle herd from Texas all the way to Montana. That's the premise. What you actually get is a sprawling epic about friendship and mortality, and what happens to men when the world they were built for disappears. Duvall, in particular, is absolutely magnificent. Gus McCrae might be the most fully realized character in Western history. He's funny and wise and reckless and heartbreaking. Norris has said watching Duvall in this role made him rethink what a tough man on screen could look like. Strength doesn't always mean silence and stoicism. Sometimes strength is knowing who you are and being completely at peace with it. Director Simon Windsor doesn't try to make this cinematic in a showy way. He just gets out of the way and lets the story and the performances breathe. That's exactly the right call. Unforgiven, 1992.
In a time when lawmen were killers.
Unforgiven, 1992. Clint Eastwood, again, but this time he's behind the camera and in front of it, and he's basically dismantling every Western he ever made and every Western myth Hollywood ever sold you. Will Money is a retired outlaw and killer. He's trying to raise pigs and raise his kids, and he's not very good at either. He takes one last job because he needs the money. And what follows is one of the darkest, most honest examinations of violence and consequence that the Western genre has ever produced. Norris has talked about how Unforgiven refuses to let anyone off the hook. The outlaws aren't glamorous. The lawman, played by Gene Hackman in a performance that won him the Oscar, is actually terrifying. The violence doesn't feel exciting. It feels awful. When someone gets shot in this movie, you feel it. There's a scene near the end where Eastwood's character, whiskey in hand, delivers one of the most quietly devastating lines in Western history about deserving. I'm not going to spoil it if somehow you haven't seen it. Just know that Norris calls Unforgiven a film that took real courage to make because it forced the audience to look at what they'd been cheering for in Westerns for 50 years. Best Picture winner at the Oscars. Completely deserved. Rio Bravo, 1959.
Bravo, with its thundering story of raw courage.
Rio Bravo, 1959. John Wayne again, and this time directed by Howard Hawks and Chuck Norris, has pointed to this specific film as the one that made him want to understand filmmaking, not just watch movies. Wayne plays a sheriff who's holding a murder suspect in jail while waiting for the U.S. Marshal to arrive and transport him to trial. The problem is, the suspect's brother is a powerful rancher who's surrounded the town with hired guns to break him out. So, Wayne is stuck in the jail with a recovering alcoholic deputy, a crippled old man, and a kid who is very fast with a gun and very aware of it. What Hawks does here is essentially a chamber piece. Most of the action is in or around that jailhouse. The tension comes from character, from how these people talk to each other, and whether they can actually trust each other when things go bad. Dean Martin plays the alcoholic deputy, and it's one of the most underrated performances in Western history. The scene where he tries to pick up a coin from a spittoon and can barely do it without his hands shaking is genuinely hard to watch. Norris said, "This movie showed him that the most interesting characters are the ones fighting something internal, not just external. The real battle in Rio Bravo isn't against the gunmen outside, it's the battle each man is fighting against his own weakness." Shane, 1953.
Drama that began when a mysterious
Shane, 1953. And we're back to this one because it keeps coming up every time serious people talk about serious Westerns. Chuck Norris has called Shane the perfect Western, and that's a big statement, but he's not wrong. A mysterious stranger rides into a valley where homesteaders are being pushed off their land by a powerful cattle baron. He takes a job on a family farm, and he tries very hard to be done with violence. And the movie is essentially about whether a man can ever truly leave that part of himself behind. Alan Ladd plays Shane, and the performance is all restraint. You can see the violence in him at all times, but he keeps it locked up. Until he can't anymore. Jack Palance plays the hired killer brought in to terrorize the homesteaders, and every scene he's in crackles with danger. Director George Stevens pioneered hidden wire rigs to make the gunshots look brutally realistic, actually yanking stuntmen off their feet when they got hit. For 1953, that was genuinely shocking. Norris said what hit him hardest about Shane was the ending. I won't spoil it, but the little boy calling after Shane as he rides away is one of the most haunting images in Western history. Some people think Shane is dead. Some people think he's just gone. Either way, it destroys you. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. Chuck Norris has called this the greatest Western ever made, and honestly, across every list, every filmmaker, every interview I've ever read about Westerns, this movie keeps coming back to the top. Sergio Leone working on a massive scale, bankrolled by Paramount. 3 men chasing a buried cache of Confederate gold during the Civil War. Clint Eastwood as the man with no name. Lee Van Cleef as the hired killer. Eli Wallach as Tuco, the comic heart of the whole enterprise. And Ennio Morricone's score, which is so iconic it has genuinely become shorthand for the entire genre. The final 3-way standoff in the graveyard runs nearly 15 minutes. Leone shoots it with close-ups of eyes, hands, gun holsters. He cuts between them dozens of times before a single shot is fired. The tension is almost unbearable. Norris has talked about how Leone understood that the anticipation of violence is more powerful than the violence itself. You're sitting there knowing something is about to happen, and Leone just keeps making you wait. Tarantino has said this movie made him want to be a filmmaker. Scorsese called it one of the best widescreen films ever made, and Chuck Norris calls it the greatest Western ever. When you've got those 3 guys agreeing on something, you probably just listen. So, there you have it. 11 Westerns according to the man, the myth, the beard, Chuck Norris. And look, I think he got it pretty much right. Maybe you'd swap one out, maybe you'd add something. Let me know in the comments what I missed. I'm Jeffrey, this is Old School Movies, and I'll see you in the next one.